Resilience and agility are the need of the hour, and companies are adopting digital technologies to remain competitive in the face of disruptions. In our next panel discussion, we'll hear our panel of experts sharing their viewpoints on how supply chain disruptions are transforming new age consumer brands in India. I would like to welcome Ms. Mahima Chugh, partner, McKinsey and Company, to moderate the discussion. Welcome, Ms. Chugh.
Hi, everyone. It's great to have all of you join us for this panel discussion today. We have really the stalwarts of consumer tech, technology joining us for this discussion. So thank you all for making the time. And while all of you are now household names, thanks to your products and how you're impacting consumers' lives in India today. I'd love to kick this off by getting each of you to just quickly introduce the core of the idea or the kernel of the idea and the source of that passion which drove you to do what you do today. And in absolutely no particular order, requesting Chakradhar, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, hi Mahima. Thanks for having me here, and it's great to share thoughts and learn as well from this panel. To start with, see, Country Delight is a direct-to-home consumer brand, and what we do is deliver fresh and pure food essentials directly from the source to the doorstep of the customer. We're a full-stack business model delivering directly to the doorstep of nearly 6 million orders on a monthly basis. And the core thought process of Country Delight when we started has been to do something big and to do something impactful that makes a difference to millions of lives. And we thought that giving pure and fresh food essentials starting with milk was a great thought given the large target addressable market and the very deep problems that we could solve in this space.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chakradhar. Shankar, can I request you to go next, please?
Sure. Our journey in Plum began with this thought that there were very few global clean beauty brands born out of India. And that's thought number one. Thought number two, skincare sometimes tends to be very almost clinical in nature, too much of problem solving, not enough fun. So we thought, why don't we combine efficacy and fun and look to create something that has a global standing born out of India. And that's the journey that we are on.
Wonderful. Thank you, Shankar. Ravikiran, may I call on you next, please?
Thanks, Mahima, for the opportunity. I'm really delighted to be sharing the stage with some of the stalwarts of consumer industry. Thanks a lot for really allowing me to be on your side. Thanks a lot to all the panelists. I'm working for the 3D experience company, we call it. The objective of our organization is to provide virtual twin experiences. Probably I'll take that through what it is. Something I'd like to keep it as a suspense till we get on with the discussion. To ensure that the organizations, both on the consumer side as well as the business side, how we can help both the sides providing these experiences, giving them the real world experience in the virtual world, so that probably there is no need of even shopping and going around. That's where we would like to get to, and all the technologies that go behind, the technology stack that goes behind in realizing these aspects of both the consumers as well as the businesses is what we are bringing to the table. And that's what I'd like to bring forth in today's discussion.
Thanks so much, Ravikiran. Malika, can I invite you next, please?
Thanks, Mahima. So, ours was a very personal struggle. I've got two daughters. I couldn't find good skincare products for them. And that's how we started the company. The company started about 4 years back. And at the Moms Co, we always say that we're on a mission to help moms make natural, safe, and effective options for themselves and their families. So we focus on creating skincare products for pregnant women, women above the age of 25, and babies, all sort of around the fact of being natural, safe, and effective. so that the mom never has to worry about what she's putting on her child's skin. Yeah. And that was where we started. And the strong ethos we follow in the company is the fact that if we think we can't use products on ourselves, we will not launch it in the market and have it as an offering to anybody else as well. And yes, that's what we've been doing so far.
Thank you so much, Malika, for that. Shantanu, I invite you to round us off on this.
Yeah, hi, my name is Shantanu. I'm the founder and CEO of Bombay Shaving Company. We are one of the leading hair removal brands. We started off as a shaving business for men, but have moved and expanded ourselves into hair removal solutions for men and women both. Our women business now accounts for almost 25% of our roughly 250 crore annual top line, and growing faster than our men's business. Our recognition and insight is that while hair growth and hair management is a fairly established and understood consumer need, from shampoos, conditioners to hair oils, hair removal, whether it's someone like me who shaves my head, or the millions of shavers of the face who are men, or women who want to remove hair from their legs, arms, and other parts of their body, hair removal is the largest delta creator in perceived self-beauty of a human being, more than fairness, more than hairstyle, even more than acne. And that need is addressed by a disparate set of brands and services. And Bombay Shaving Company aims to kind of give a one-stop solution and take it from a functional product to a sensorial fun product, as Shankar calls his brand as well. So I think we realize that younger consumers are attached to experiences more than they're attached to function, and hopefully we give joy to our consumers while they do that. Our vision is 2-5-10, which is 2 crore bathrooms, 5 products per bathroom, and 10 minutes of happiness removing hair you don't want.
Thanks a lot for that, Shantanu and everyone. And let me just kick this discussion off with with this question of, as you look at over the last 2 years, of course, have been quite an aberration in how societies function or how individuals function, and just disruption. But if you take a little bit of a step back and a little bit of a 50,000 feet view and take a 4 to 5 year view of the Indian consumer, the way that she's making specific choices, and maybe we start with personal care a little bit, and Malika, I'd love to invite you to kick this discussion off. The way that she's making choices of what product I actually want to buy, starting from how she does the research to how she makes the selection. What are some of the meaningful shifts that you're seeing?
This is a very interesting question, Mahima, because we just went through a round of consumer studies. And I think I'll tell you what we have seen over the years change for us, and change with the Indian consumer in general, right? I think we're just on the blink of just starting the journey into skincare for a lot of Indian consumers. If you see, in past, we've typically been a very face wash heavy or a soap heavy country, and then move from there to adopting face washes and face creams, which is typically a moisturizer, and that was about it, right? Now you see conversations revolving around serums, face oils, face masks, your regimes that you should follow, not just regimes that you should follow, but also regimes specific to your skin concern, your skin types, and all of that. So I think just the amount of information that the consumer today has on skincare is very, very large. So I think I've actually seen the shift happen in the market from being a very not so evolved market to a completely evolved market where there are a huge amount of conversations happening. It's very interesting to see that while the brands kept introducing newer concepts and newer products in general, the adoption from the consumer was also very, very high, which just typically talks about how the consumer was looking out for solutions and that they couldn't find. And then when they found them, they were very open to sort of creating their own regimes, routines, and all of that. And I think it's gone through a full cycle where it was just identification on what all I need to put on my skin, to creating regimes for yourself. And now it is about finding that effective 2 or 3 products that can last in your shelf, right? Our last study that we did, it was like an Indian consumer, typically over the last 2 years, which was, as you said, very correctly, an aberration as well, bought about 10 different set of products, out of which they were using only about 3 to 4 brands and 3 to 4 products in their skincare. And I think that's the change that has happened over the last 2 to 3 months, where they're identifying those 2-3 products that their skin really needs and kind of going very deep on figuring out what is that product that's going to actually work for me, which means everything from getting information on the ingredient that the company is talking about, Not just that, then verifying it through internet and the information available on internet saying, does this actually do what it is supposed to do? Or is it just a false marketing claim that is being put up? And then back it up with all the reviews that they can find online in terms of, whether the product spoken of is good, not good, has it had an effect on the consumer's mind or not? And very quickly move from just good to have products to really effective products that solve for their need. And that's the evolution that I've personally seen over the last 4.5 years.
That's fascinating, Malika. And as we think about, this rapid consumption of content, which helps her make those decisions. Shantanu and Shankar, I'd love to hear from you on how have you seen that, if at all, you're seeing that vary across demographics, whether it is in different parts of the country on how these choices are being made and how consumers are making these decisions, or demographics basis either, life stage or any other such measurable parameters. How are you seeing that shift happening?
Okay, so 2-3 things, right, Mahima? I think number one is we are finding consumers across demographics getting easier to engage, harder to please. Okay, so repeat rates are falling, but consumers' ability to experiment, especially as they get younger and younger, is much higher. They're a lot less loyal to brands, and also they're a lot more influenced by companies they can relate to personally, especially founders they can relate to personally, right? So, for example, the Nykaa IPO was a lot about Falguni, and you could see that consumers of Nykaa were kind of doing it for her. And this is the Elon Musk paradigm shift that a lot of people are seeing, right? That's one way. Younger consumers are a lot more aware. Number two is, I think, aspiration is across the board. Even if you look at tier 2, tier 3 India, they're still watching the same shows on Netflix and Amazon Prime and so on, right? So their ability to and it's not like disposable income is very different. So you will have the same consumer in tier 2, tier 3 India. You can service them through every e-commerce platform and D2C provider. So their ability to buy is also equally there, in fact higher, because they don't have access to the same malls and physical outlets that maybe someone in a Bombay or a Delhi would have. So we are seeing consumers becoming more experimentative, becoming more relate to brands a lot easier than they would earlier. By brand, I mean newer brands. And also you have access to every pin code in the country. So that augurs very well for young, challenger companies who are trying to be disruptors through maybe even micro innovations in their products.
I think it's pretty much the same what Shantanu was referring to. Just that, one very interesting thing we've seen, especially over the last 2 or 3 years, is that the older demographic also engages quite surprisingly well on especially video content. And if you are able to reach them, and YouTube, I think, is in particular, I think that demographic sees more of YouTube than Instagram. Again, this is somewhat anecdotal at my end, but I've seen that YouTube reaches the older demographic very effectively, and there is a sort of patience to watch through longer videos as opposed to the younger ones who are in the reels territory. So there is a lot of in-depth engagement on content as the demographic grows older. But I think in terms of geographies and everything else that Shantanu said, it's pretty much the access has been leveled and democratized. There is nothing that essentially differentiates a metro from a tier 2, tier 3. The differences are very, very small and nuanced.
Interesting. So there's more homogeneity in this country. That's sort of the revolution that's underway, is what I'm hearing.
From an income standpoint, Mahima, from an income standpoint and from price sensitivity standpoint, but you will see a lot of differences in people, the kind of packaging that works, for example, in Andhra is very different from the kind of packaging that will work in North, right? So shelf throw variations are there, packaging clicks variations are there. Even the kind of content, vernacular content works a lot better in South than it works, for example, in, let's say, Bengal or Orissa, and there's still more Hindi driven consumption so there is a lot of difference. India is a very different country, but the cool part is people are picking up products and are experimenting a lot more. That is one theme that I think is constant
across all. Got it. And Chakradhar, we've so far talked about more of the choices that the consumer is making on what product to pick up. What's the kind of expectation? Well, I totally understand your category is actually quite, the category you play in is quite specific in terms of when the consumer expects it. But how are you seeing the expectation on service levels evolve of when I want what I want with, in the era that we live in today, where I have choices to now pick the same product through not only a variety of ways, but just variety of speeds, right? So how are you seeing that decision influence our choices?
So, Mahima, I mean, like the way the whole digital world is evolving, there is a big change in consumer behavior, and it's tilted towards ease of access and convenience. That is the starting point where people think of change, and that is combined by the by virtue of what an Amazon, Flipkart, a Zomato, Swiggy have done in terms of bringing change behavior in consumers. There is a lot of openness to try, which has come in, because you're coming there, you're getting a good deal. Maybe you've come for a product at a certain discount, and then you start discovering something else, and then you would want to try it out. And if you are happy with a bunch of things which many entrepreneurs are doing, then you start becoming more open-minded as a consumer. And that's a big change that this country has seen in terms of what they are consuming. And when it comes to products like ours, where it's purely essentials, where the frequency is very high, it's very high involvement while there is a decision making, and then becomes a very low involvement purchase. In those cases, service is more of a given or a hygiene, more than a delighting factor. What is a delighting factor is what product you give and how you make a difference with that product in people's life. So while there will be innovations in service, and if there was a same day delivery couple of years back, today there is a 10-minute delivery, and that's the new mantra which everyone has to adopt. Finally, there is no option for everyone, because it starts becoming a hygiene at some level. Where you can truly differentiate yourself is by the product that you give. And since the Indian consumer has become very discerning, there is a lot of choice for the consumer to try different things. As a business, you first need to be very specific about what your thought process is. And people don't look at single products, they start looking at you as a brand, and that goes to what is the purpose of your existence. Why are you different as a brand compared to someone else, and why should a consumer try you? Because at the end of the day, most of these things tend to be commoditized. So the why you're selling what you're selling is as important as the functional aspects of what you're doing. These are some of the amazing things that are happening, which give a lot of businesses opportunity to try new things. But at the same time, the customer becomes quite unforgiving if their expectations are not matched, which is again a good thing.
Absolutely. Like you said, the consumer is evolving, becoming more discerning. And one of the theme that comes out, and Ravi, I'd love to get your perspective on this. Everyone spoke about this whole, Shantanu mentioned the amount of experimentation, or Malika mentioned that, loyalty, however, what are the 3 products she's going to have? Or, as Chakradhar was saying that your product really needs to stand out. All this points to a lot of experimentation, a lot of content digestion, and hence a lot of data getting generated. Right? That's the perception it creates. And with ways now to measure this data digitally, what is really getting unlocked in harnessing the power of all this information, which allows brands to make whether packaging choices or what's really discerning about my brand, really get that kind of clarity. Would be great to get your inputs on that.
Sure, Mahima. I think the point that you touched about, what I liked about Shantanu, what he said is the consumers are becoming lesser and lesser loyal to the brands because they're wanting to experiment more and more brands. They want to try more and more new things every time. And in this context, every brand would like to get as close as possible to the consumer. How do I stand out? Is the brand's primary objective these days, apart from the fulfillment part, which is now becoming more of a hygiene, right? In this context, the data plays a significant role. it gives a lot of sentiment analysis. When I say sentiment analysis, not just about reading the data as it is the data, but understanding the semantics of it, understanding the tone of it, understanding the context of it, right? It's not just about seeing data as some input, some points, some words, but understanding the intent, context, the semantics behind it. I think that will play a significant role. And as long as we have some kind of data interpretation engines, okay, from the digital technology standpoint, that can help with these data points. It's not just about there are so many personal care products that the mom's company, and then the Bombay shaving company that Shantanu spoke about. Delivering the experiences, creating that love marks for these consumers is becoming critical. And how do you get there? By listening to the voice of the customer. And voice is not just about words, it's about the feelings as well. It's about the emotions as well. And that's how you shape the attitudes of the consumer. And data is playing a significant role. And today we have plethora of technologies. I think data, India probably is at the helm of affairs as far as data mining, data capabilities are concerned. I think leveraging these techniques, these data mining capabilities, are not just for words, but for the semantics, but for the emotions. I think that's where the brands will have a higher leverage in getting what is that consumers are talking about, what's their voice, what's their emotion behind it, and how they can tap into that emotion and probably maximize their brand loyalty.
Very, very well put, Ravi. And I think, one of the things that you mentioned and one of the panel members mentioned spurred a thought. And, Shankar, I'd love to get your views on this, which is, we're talking about Netflix and Amazon Prime on one side influencing choices. And a lot of it is Western today, right? And especially for, let's say, your category that you work in or that your products are in. How is that dynamic changing? If the importance of being delighted with the experience, with the distinctiveness of the product superseding everything, and then it doesn't matter whether it's an India product or it's from outside, as long as it looks and feels aspirational, delivers what it's supposed to, or the fact that this is made in India and hence probably tailored for me by somebody who understands my skin needs, starting to matter. Do you see that as a metric influencing choices?
I think especially, I can speak for the beauty and personal care category. The thing about made in India has a little bit of an emotional appeal, but not a functional, let's say, superiority or inferiority at all. There's a little bit of an emotional connect, but it's not a make or break deciding factor. I think the market is now sort of stratifying into two types of people. One who are still in the whole, I love herbal products, Ayurvedic, I love everything plant-based and natural kind of camp. And the other who is pretty much agnostic, who want to see the science and the proof behind whatever they're using. So there is, of course, people in between, but I think for the large part, I see two such cohorts developing. The ones who believe that everything natural is safe and effective, no side effects kind of way of thinking. They will continue to believe. It's a matter of belief. It's not a question of being proven wrong or otherwise. Whereas the other camp is very interesting, and that camp I think has strengthened through the last 2 years of voracious content consumption. They've all become incredibly smarter and more and better informed. They look for proof of concept. They look for proof of efficacy. They look for the why behind everything. So it doesn't matter if it is niacinamide or salicylic acid that is doing the job, but it is doing the job. It's great if niacinamide is combined with rice water or salicylic acid is combined with tea tree. That's a bonus, but they're not hung up on it. They want rational explanations to be given and proof of concept to be a proof of efficacy to be established. So I think that's where the market is headed. So, and in many of these, it's really each person thinking for oneself rather than everybody sort of running in a given direction. I think we are past those days of people just the Pied Piper is dragging people to a certain way of thinking. That's not going to happen. People are going to think for themselves.
Shankar, picking up on that thought of this very personal decision and very personal behavior, starting from whether the organization, whether the company inspires me, to whether the product works for me, and should I even try this, to how is the experience of engaging with the product, right? Um, I'd love to get all of your views on this whole concept of personalization, and to some extent loyalty. I think Malika, you referred to that, right? Like, how do I really build that loyal base? As all of us know, in the West, it has been a huge source of upside for from brands who have big loyalty programs, all the way to even e-retailers who get a lot of their income from recommendations, because their personalization engines just become so much sharper. How do you see that trend evolving in India, either from consumer choices or delivery models or whatever it might be? But this whole animal of personalization and loyalty, do you see that unlocking value in India today across sectors?
So, Mahima, I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. Personalization and loyalty are very big, at least in businesses like ours, where, at least we operate in 13 cities today, and there are at least 6 different languages that are spoken. Milk is such a big part of your life and culture that you perceive it differently in different places. So when people and the kind of problems that people face with, let's say, milk is very different in different geographies. In northern India, it's a very organized space where milkman is quite less. So the problem is with natural milk versus reconstituted milk. In a place like Mumbai, the milkman is very common. So it's about safety versus versus what they're usually getting. So the problems are different. The approach needs to be different, but at an overall level, the promise is fairly simple and consistent. So while from a brand point of view, your job is nearly done at a very homogeneous level, the nuance in communication becomes very different when you approach a customer of one geography to another geography, and that's where brands are differentiating themselves, and that's where we also differentiate ourselves. Like, for example, Shantanu was referring to different packaging in different cities. So these are kind of nuances that are always going to be there, and today, because of the digital power that we have and because of the direct connect we have to the customers, feedback is very rapid, feedback is very iterative, and you can constantly improve and perfect yourself as things keep happening. And to your second question, loyalty is again a very big component. People, once they again, the whole panel was mentioning that people switch if they don't like. People have a lot of choice today, and if brands bring customers with loyal causes towards them, whether it is your communication can bring loyalty, or whether it is certain functional programs that you can help bring loyalty with the customer, they give a huge advantage, because your cost of customer acquisition finally doesn't change. If you keep increasing your funnel of loyal customers, you have your retention is better, and you're building a exponential scaling effect within your business. So these two are very big, and data plays a huge role. Data and customer research plays a very big role in one's ability to stay on top of a trend like this.
Malika, I'd love to get your reflections on this as well. I remember, when in the early days of Momsco, a lot of the stories you spoke about were very personal stories, because your genesis was so personal. So, how do you think about this whole idea of N equal to 1? Yes, I want to, it's a brand promise, but this is such a personal product. So how do I, as I scale, how do I continue to think about my customers as individuals in their own right, and hence, continue to build their loyalty. And while I might not change my product, what can I change, to keep this relevant for them? Any views on that?
Yeah. So I think there are two aspects to answering this question, right? So in terms of building loyalty, is of course extremely important. There's no denying about it, right? The cost of acquisition of a consumer is just so high That if you don't have a very high lifetime value of the consumer, it's not going to work out in a very feasible manner, just for the business perspective of it, right? Now, the question on how do you build loyalty, and that's the question that you're asking, right? There's one way of building loyalty by telling the consumer that the purpose that you're looking out for, or what you're looking out for from a not just a product ask, but your overall ethos as well, matches that of the brand. And hence, there is loyalty that you can get from. I still remember, we got letters, handwritten letters from consumers where they spoke and asked about, can you please reduce the impact of plastic, because I don't want to use plastic in our products, right? Which kind of got us to initiate a separate program for being plastic neutral. There were conversations that happened on you not testing your products on animals. We never did that, but just to give the comfort to the consumer and to sort of validate that, we got ourselves certified by PETA as being cruelty free, right? These are asks of the consumer, which was more and away from the product, right? The genesis starts from the product. If your product is not good, there is no way you can build loyalty. So I'm putting that part of it, that your product market fix and your product is fine. And then on top of it, there are a lot of other asks that the consumer is asking for. And is the brand constantly listening to the consumer and solving for the consumer's needs and asks is very important. The moment you acknowledge what they're asking for and tell them, yes, I have done it because you asked for me, and that sort of translates into much higher loyalty and not a very large word of mouth, right? Which makes your acquisition of consumer far more simpler than anybody else. We're in a very high word of mouth category, and all these things where the consumer feels that the brand is listening to them and making different choices and changing their ways in terms of delivering the right, the purpose that they want to stand for, makes a lot of difference and kind of gets loyalty coming up dramatically. And it's not necessarily you having to change the product. You will realize that the people will never come back to you on functional asks, or even the people who come and ask you on those functional asks would be very, very little, right? Like the number of people who would probably come and ask, what is the percentage of niacinamide in your product, would be negligible almost, right? But will this product work for me, and can you promise that this will work for me, is a totally different set of consumer base, right? So that's sort of adding on all of this becomes extremely important to build on loyalty. I actually do this property on our own social handles, which is Ask Malika Anything, where I as a founder go on one particular day and I ask consumers saying, tell me whatever you have, in terms of feedback for products, or you want us to change something, or even new launches, right? You cannot probably change a product that you have made that's working well for a lot of people. But a lot of times consumer gives you insights on what is it that they're looking out for. And if you create that and answer their questions, I have actually seen these people becoming loyalists, and like how they become parts of your testing cycles for product feedbacks. They become people who help you iterate and improve the product before it actually gets launched in the market. They also help you create and craft very effective marketing communications as well, right? And the whole process of engagement with the consumer builds very high loyalty. So I think consumer engagement is one of the key things that can help build loyalty. And of course, that engagement could be on different aspects, which is either in terms of product development or engagement through offers post-purchase as well, right? Both ways. But I think it's extremely, extremely important to build that loyal customer base for yourselves.
And let's advise for all future founders or current founders out there who have the idea, they have the product, and now they're thinking about how do I now get it in the hands of the consumer, right? So whether it's from, how do I make this decision of should I manufacture myself or no, this is a category now where it has a lot of independent entities out there who can help do that for me. So let me outsource manufacturing and packaging and find the companies that will do it for me at a very effectively till I get to a certain scale and I start to make owning choices. Versus, what the actual product manufacturing is so core to what I am that, it makes sense for me to own that versus outsourcing it. So how are you making those choices, and how do you, what your advice would be to founders making those or trying to make those choices today? And I totally recognize that this varies by category. But maybe Shantanu, we talk about personal care, and then Chakradhar, get your views on more essentials that go to the kitchen.
Yeah, I think building on what Malika said, I have a slightly different view on personalization. I think in our category, it's a lower engagement category. Hair removal is something people don't like to talk about, It's a product that stays inside the bathroom and is not part of social conversation, right? It's important for brands to talk, but know that we will play a certain role in the consumer's lives, but not will be a critical role, but it won't be a top of mind role, right? So important to, in fact, kind of give consumers distance and space and communicate only what is needed. I've seen a lot of brands kind of try to say, for every consumer, tell us your hair type, skin type. We will make exactly the right kind of product for you. I think it's all gimmick, and I don't think it works, and it's absolutely unscalable from a manufacturing standpoint also. But yes, I think making consumers feel special, like what Malika was saying, I think is super critical, right? Telling them that we are, for example, clean label, or we don't use a certain set of chemicals that we know are harmful for you, or we don't harm animals, not tested in ways that are environment unfriendly. It's absolutely critical. So even gifting is a 35,000 crore market in India, uh, fully personalized, right? So Amazon has figured out how to do it. There are a lot of very specific personalized gifting platforms. We try to do it a lot by saying today is Valentine's Day, right? So put a photograph with your Valentine and we'll send them a specialized shaving kit or whatever, make them smell good and make it look red and all that. Those personalizations absolutely work. Coming to your question on owning versus manufacturing, outsourcing, I think the fundamental thesis is, at least from an India standpoint in personal care, there is massive manufacturing capacities and expertise that is outside. Those are problems that entrepreneurs honestly should not be solving. What they should be solving is formulation and industrial design, right? So stuff that differentiates you entirely from competition and from what consumers can otherwise get, you should keep in-house. So for example, in our case, we have a completely in-house R&D lab. We control the fragrances, we control the packaging, structural design, we control the industrial design of the way our razors are shaped, all the prototyping, all that happens in-house. But we know, for example, that because FMCG manufacturing in India through special economic zones, government, Unilever, Procter, Reckitt, Colgate have been successful businesses. There's a huge ecosystem, very similar to auto components, of manufacturers who do it far better than we do, right? And the scale has to be, for example, we do now almost 1.2 million products a month. I still think we are only 10 to 15% of the capacity we need to be at to actually start saying, okay, let us build a factory for this, or let us own a manufacturing facility for this. So the idea for an entrepreneur is try to find a way to have meaningful quantities, which means your choice of product has to be good upfront, so that you get to work with the better quality manufacturers, so they can take care of quality control, wastage minimization, consistency, while you control, the thesis of the product, the messaging, the quality, of shelf throw, etc. You control. So I think in personal care, I think that playbook, and I think Shankar and Malika probably do it very similarly. But that's how I've seen most people do it, unless again it's a very specialized kind of put 20 chemicals only for one consumer, and then you have your own setup. I don't think that other than that there should be a different answer.
So Mahima, like unlike Shantanu's business or even Malika and Shankar's business, ours is a perishable product,
Right.
and our entire business is based on bettering that has been done for 40-50 years. And the way you can disrupt something that's been done in a very organized way for the last 4-5 decades is by completely changing the game. And when you're trying to change the game, you need to figure out all the way to the source what are the steps that everyone is missing, and how you can bridge those steps to sort of build something uniquely different, because your product has to stand out. At the end of the day, the customer is quite value conscious, and if you want to deliver the customer a meaningful difference in the product which satisfies our promise, which is to give pure and fresh products, we need to figure out what are the pain points and solve them. And we live in a world where tech is able to disrupt everything that we do. So when we went about solving for problems, and even now when we go about solving for problems across categories, we have developed the art of understanding supply chain very strongly, and using tech to solve problems that are that 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 do not require investing much capital. So it makes
Give me an example, Chakradhar, when you're saying using tech to solve problems.
So for example, our sourcing of milk, we source milk to every farmer. Every farmer's milk is tested for adulterants, and these adulterants are calibrated every 6 months for changing landscape in terms of quality measurement. The temperature of our milk is measured real time, right from the farmer to the doorstep of the customer. We take up refurbished manufacturing facilities. We use the traditional processes. We believe in the philosophy of minimal processing. So for example, dahi, there is a way of manufacturing in an over processed quick way where you have large capacities, and there is another way where you can make it the way it's made at home, ghar jaisa dahi, which goes with the name of our product. So slow heating. So in slow heating, the problem is there is no way to figure out whether it is heated enough or not, because ghar pe chal jata hai, but when you're doing it in a manufacturing setup, it doesn't work that way. So you need to have certain tech in place that sort of tells you that whether this product is heated correctly, and everyone within the organization, whether it's me sitting here, is able to see that every batch of dahi has been complied for in terms of the process that we have customized and designed internally. So this finally ends up in a very big difference. We are in the philosophy of delivering fresh food. So we do not add any preservatives or adulterants. Our products are low shelf life products. Customers need to order fresh and consume fresh. When you are delivering products that have low shelf life, it's very important to have control over cold chain, over warehousing, over first in, first out, inventory management, all these things. And all this is possible because you have tech. So we are one of the few businesses in the country that's present in 13 states at a very small scale. Although we're $100 million business, this is very small scale compared to the industry that we operate in. And like there may be only one or two businesses in the country that have the kind of presence that we have at such a small scale with a very minimal capital expenditure.
Got it. And very, very helpful, Chakradhar. And it
actually, Mahima,
yeah.
As I was thinking, right, about I've seen, like, for example, Country Delight obviously operates in milk and milk products, but I've seen, for example, if you see food and beverages in industry, we don't have someone from F&B here, but if you see food and beverages in industry, a lot of them have taken vertical integration choices much earlier on. So whether it's Viva or Paperboat or some of the established, Haldiram took it at a very, very, started as a mithai shop and built it out, right? So I do feel in certain cases where we see it happen with Pressery, Epigamia, for example, very early on decided that they wanted to build out their own manufacturing. So I'm thinking out loud. I think in certain cases where maybe shelf life issues are different, packaging MOQ or quantity of packaging could be much lesser. There, I think choices of making on your own could be a little easier. Personal care, I think my answer was, I think, specific to personal care more than it was to most products. So just wanted to make that correction.
And I'll also add to that, right? Like, I think the rule here is that whatever is core to your business and whatever is going to differentiate you over anyone else is something that should always remain with you and remain in-house. Anything else that's not going to make too much of a difference to your life is where you can look to outsource it, right? So, like, for instance, in our case, product development and R&D is core to what you do, because that's going to be the differentiator over anyone else. That remains in-house. Manufacturing can be outsourced, because there you can have lots of legal boundaries where you can sort of save your formula from getting shifted here and there. Logistics is not core to us, which is where you can. Branding, marketing is hardcore core to us and hence should be with the team, right? So anything which is not setting you apart from everyone else who's there can be outsourced, but anything that's very, very core to your business and your existence must always remain in-house.
And if I take that thought further, Shankar, and get your views on it, where is it getting easier and easier to outsource these non-core parts, which is taking lesser and lesser of your time, or across all elements of the supply chain? And yes, let's keep product development aside because we spoke about that at length.
Right.
Where is it getting consistently easier, either in terms of options, in terms of capability, talent? That is just, now not doesn't even come as a question in your mind anymore.
So clearly manufacturing, as Shantanu said, most of beauty and I think almost all of beauty and personal care, with a few exceptions that I know of, startups have taken the outsourcing route on manufacturing. logistics is something we started off with in-house in terms of delivering, at least packing our own orders for both B2B and B2C. Now that is completely outsourced. And there are lots of choices and options that are emerging there with interesting capabilities that we would never be able to build in-house. So compared to manufacturing, where we could, for argument's sake, build those capabilities in-house, some of the integrations and tech capabilities that are being built by some of the sort of logistics startups are outside of our capability zone currently, because they're just able to aggregate much better. They're just able to solve problems at a much wider scale, and much faster than what we ever could, because that's their core business. So clearly there, it's a different thing where we can possibly do it, but there are people who can do it better than us, particularly when it comes to D2C fulfillment. I think that space is transformed in the last couple of years, maybe 3 years. Same with B2B logistics. It's less, let's say, it's been less agile compared to D2C. It's still sort of stuck in last decade. But I can see lots of startups moving there also. The problem there is that the customer is not homogeneous. In D2C, the customer is it's an own entity. The same person orders from Flipkart, Amazon, brand A, brand B, brand C. In B2B, the customer is a distributor in Varanasi, a distributor in Jamshedpur, a distributor in Coimbatore. They behave very, very differently. So people have not been able to do it. But there again, I see some elements of uniformity, and therefore solutions to problems coming up, which we, for example, are now completely moving to outsource model for even B2B operations. So I think pretty much the entire supply chain can today be smartly outsourced to experts if you wanted to.
And Ravikiran, building on Shankar's point of this, the fact that there is a lot of technology integration that suppliers are doing, or whether it's logistics and a lot of the other elements he mentioned, help characterize that for us a little bit. What is really changing? Because there seems to be a quiet revolution underway in terms of logistics, where suddenly it's become so seamless. Access has become so much easier. It's not even a moment's thought, right? Of course, I will expect this product to land at my doorstep either in 10 minutes or tomorrow and have that predictability. So what is really changing in that background in terms of technology that's enabling that?
Yeah, sure, Mahima. Firstly, I'd like to delve upon the points that they have brought out, the divergent perspectives that they brought out. For somebody, it is what they stand for as a product. What is that they stand for as a product is important, and that's what is their, it's not core competence, it's their differentiation. And whereas for somebody, the product itself is the differentiation, right? In case of the products where you can probably arrive at a optimum product with right quality controls at the manufacturing stage, obviously they would outsource it. They can get the economies of scale, and that's how they can probably minimize the cost of manufacturing. So I think both perspectives are, from a tech side, are well understood and really, really, different thoughts. But talking about how businesses are looking at how do they differentiate. Earlier, it is all about you do it locally. If it's your core competence, you outsource it. If it's not your core competence, I think that perspective is changing a little bit. It's not about core competence anymore. It's about how you differentiate. Whether or not it's your competence, right? You build those competencies if you need, but don't go by that alone. And coming to your point on this tech's role in this is, I think today a lot of it has changed because of e-commerce as well. A lot of companies now, there is Instamarts, there are 10-minute deliveries. I think Chakradhar was mentioning about, it's more of a hygiene now anymore. It's not about, it's expected. It is not something that you brag about anymore, right? It's expected. What's changing is, and then add the pandemic dimension, consumers are not able to step out. They're making the orders, they buy and try, and if they don't like, they send it back. There is so much of variance that is coming into the logistics spectrum. One is in terms of SKUs that get into the variance in the SKU sizes, boxes, and all of that. The packaging, because that is what is differentiating aspect for some of the personal care companies. That's one element. And the packaging cannot be disturbed, distracted. It has to be packaged well. And then the third dimension is about the agility to deliver it. How faster people are able to deliver it, because the consumer is growing impatient by the day. Partly the blame is on the e-commerce companies because they have set higher big higher bar. So now what happens to the companies that are not in e-commerce space yet? Even if they are in e-commerce space, they have not figured out the delivery part or the logistics part themselves, because all other e-commerce companies have their own delivery mechanisms. So they are logistics companies, tech companies who are delivering logistics than anything else, right? They are tech companies with logistics expertise. How are the other companies that are in the regular business probably coming out with an omni-channel approach now, getting into e-commerce, and they want to figure this out, sort this out? That's where tech plays a significant role for these kind of companies. While the other companies are tech companies that are delivering products, here there are the companies that are products are their business, tech is not their business, products is their business, and they want tech to help them. So I don't know whether I'm able to differentiate or distinguish between these companies. Swiggy is a tech company that's delivering, whereas there is another company which is not a tech company. It's actually in the business of delivering products, and they don't have the tech to really be as good as Swiggy. And that's where the bringing these technological expertise to these companies, in terms of planning, in terms of stocking, in terms of just-in-time principles. There are so many concepts that we all have heard of, and bringing them to the reach of the small companies and the upcoming companies so that they can scale faster. I think Chakradhar brought out a very interesting dimension, that they have given the importance to this very, very early. It's not that, we wanted to figure it out later, and they have taken this as one of their core activities from probably day one or day two, and they have given the right emphasis to this. So
But Ravi, help characterize for me a little bit. Help me understand what is it, because technology is a very big word. So what has changed in the background? Are we talking about better planning because forecasting models have gotten better?
Yeah.
Are we talking about prediction of, hey, this channel structure will make sense for you here, and this service level will make sense for you there because algorithms are now better? Help bring it to life for me a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So obviously, first is it all boils down to how do you forecast your demand. In a consumer brands, the demand forecasting is very critical, and then planning your supply chain, accurately model and simulate the outcomes of your planning scenarios. That's one. Obviously, that's where the puzzles are becoming complex and complex. Earlier, the complexity in the optimization puzzle is very small. Now there is so much of variation that's coming in. So the technology in planning and solving that optimization puzzle, and that's where technology is playing a significant role. And to be able to realigning with your forecasting, the forecasting has to be closer to your reality. Otherwise, you will run into the inventory scenarios, right? So how do you get closer and more agile and dynamic with respect to your forecasting? I mean, linking the supply chain to your forecasting capabilities and bringing more or less with no difference between these two dimensions, bringing these two elements of demand and supply as close as possible, and using these technological optimization engines and the forecasting engines and the logistics engine together, so that there is an integrated way of delivering these two dimensions, right? That's the another thing. And as you rightly said, being on the edge of assessing and understanding the consumer, understanding the data, the emotional dimensions of the consumer, the other dimensions of the consumer, so that you are leveraging the data to tap the consumer behavior much earlier than you get into your forecasting cycle and your planning cycle. Technology plays. Sorry. So technology plays a role in all of these elements, from optimizing your planning scenarios to understanding your consumer to delivering them to forecasting your the demand, forecasting the demand, and ensuring that the supply chain logistics and the planning deliveries are optimized in line with the demands that have been forecasted. So everywhere the tech plays a role. I mean, I don't want to get into the specifics of coding and all of that, but yeah, at a high level, all the three phases is where it gets into.
No, very, very helpful, Ravikiran. I think we have some time before we wrap up. And before we do, I'd love to ask all of you two questions. One, a prediction for the future. And yes, it can be on anything, but maybe focused on what we are discussing today. But one prediction for the future and one hope or one expectation, demand, whatever it might be, that should change, hopefully.
Can I go first? if I may, because if it is about prediction, it is tech. That's what, as a techie, I would like to bring forward. I think what's happening, one trend that has come out, Mahima, after this pandemic is consumers are shopping more and more from their comforts. Okay. There are products that you cannot shop just by seeing them. For example, personal care products, you have to use them, try them, and then only you can really continue to use them or not. That's how you make your decision as a consumer. But there are products where the technology, that's what I talked about at the beginning, the virtual twin experiences. I take an example, which is probably a reality in Indian context. With the pandemic, more of us are working from home. And earlier, home is mostly to go and sleep overnight and then come back to work. Now, if you have 2 kids, 2 online classes rooms, and then both are working, then you need 4 rooms. You have to configure your existing setup, to be able to meet these changing and evolving needs because of this pandemic. And that's where, the virtual twin experience, how do you configure by having this augmented reality experience? Not the products that you use or consume. I'm talking about the products that you, like homes, how do you configure your homes? How do you decide on what home to buy? How do you configure your kitchens and all of that? So especially that as an example I'm taking. They're not consumed products as an end consumer, but the products that you will utilize and you can experience with your eyes, but not by other sensory organs. So there, the virtual reality and augmented reality is going to play a significant role as we move along. That's one of the trends that I'm betting on in the next 3 to 5 years.
Wonderful. Thanks for that, Ravi. Others in no particular order, but whoever wants to go first or second.
So Mahima, one thing which I personally believe is that like this decade is going to be an India decade. I think there'll be a bunch of India businesses that could be solving world problems and not only India problems. That's something I very strongly believe in, given the way the startup ecosystem is evolving and the depth that is coming in. We are early, but I personally feel that in a decade from now, something like that could be happening. And a big hope is that, to solve more Indian problems, there are a lot of startups that are coming, solving layers of problems, so that if someone comes and wants to solve a specific problem, it becomes very easy. So for example, if Country Delight was there today, maybe we wouldn't have had to solve a home delivery problem of sorts. So I'm hoping that there is a big ecosystem of startups that come and solve many of these complex problems, so that, for an entrepreneur wanting to do something good, it becomes a very easy ecosystem.
Wonderful thought. Thanks for that, Chakradhar.
I think I can go next, maybe.
Of course.
My prediction is a little contra, so let's see how this fares. My prediction is that somewhere physical retail is going to bounce back big time, and it's maybe e-commerce share will increase to 40-50%, maybe even more, but the relevance and the sort of specialness of physical retail, it will have to evolve, but it will be meaningful and significant. The hope that I have is that we actually live up to our potential as the tech capital of the world in terms of being able to find people who are ready to go and, just solve problems instead of right now. It's, I think, a nightmare to get any tech done for non-tech companies. So that's my hope, that it just gets a little more simpler to do these things.
Thanks for that, Shankar.
Yeah, so I think I'll go next. I agree with Chakri and Shankar both. I think this is going to be India's decade. I think we are all seeing what's happening with the US, with China. There is certain cost pressures which might have price inflationary impact on a lot of categories. But the good part is when consumption push is so high, savings, leave COVID aside where savings kind of went up, but overall we are seeing savings as a percentage of income going down. We are seeing investments across the board in more risky asset classes. We know that younger people are going to spend more money on experiences. So great time to build brand. And when e-commerce, for example, Flipkart, Amazon are singularly responsible for building the entire warehousing and supply chain capabilities of the country over the last 10 years. They've done it, right? Obviously, maybe capital inefficient or whatever, but they've done it, right? So I'm fairly certain that now the next 10 years will be about more capabilities, and we'll see, like Shankar was talking about, like, I'm finding us outsource a lot more things, right? Compared to 3-4 years back. Last mile delivery, there are 5 companies. Warehousing, there are, including like traditional companies now know how to do warehousing for D2C brands, right? Whether it's assembly, quality control, AWE number mapping, all of that stuff is done by like very traditionally, like a Gujarati 60-year-old promoter is now figuring out here, how do you do it the right way? So you know that ecosystem building is happening. And you know that a lot of these capability will come out. I don't think that 40-50% will move to e-commerce. I do think that even 15-18%, which is what China is at, is also very, very optimistic. I do think physical retail, as Shankar is saying, will come back in a big, big way. Footfalls are already increasing, and India is an omni-channel country, right? People will buy across the board. So very interesting to see how this will evolve. But I was at our packaging, one of our packaging companies. They're going to IPO next year, but I was at their R&D facility the other day. What they're doing with paper and cardboard and everything is just off the charts, right? So I'm loving some of the technological innovations that are happening in very traditional industries. I don't know whether you saw Lay's, like PepsiCo brand Lay's, put consumer faces above the package to show. Licious, for example, is putting consumer images on their packaging. So I do think that like innovation is going to be amazing across supply chain, and I hope that percentage of logistics and supply chain cost as a percentage of net sales for the industry comes below 10%. Is my hope. And if that is the case, then I think the supply chain has done a good job in general.
Thanks for that, Shantanu. Malika.
Yeah, so I think, just building on to everyone's point, I just had a in-life case to talk about, right? Like my in-laws just moved from UAE back to India. And it's very interesting to see how they have adopted into online shopping, right? So from not buying anything online to just buying everything offline to being super, super excited about those 15 minutes quick commerce and quick deliveries that's happening, right? So I think one prediction that I have is you'll find a lot of different, sort of age group of people and different demographics of people move to online, which will give a lot of space for newer brands and newer concerns to be solved, which would probably not make sense in a completely offline world. There are no two ways about it that beyond a particular stage, for every brand, offline and online, which is omni-channel, is the way to grow for sure. So everybody will have to figure out their omni-channel strategy. In fact, we're actually seeing retail come back very, very strongly right now already, right? So I think that's for sure. But it'll be very interesting to see how the new age India, which is not just younger population, but the older ones also who are adopting to the new ways, kind of make the changes and adapt to this all new change of, sort of shopping as a behavior. And it'll be very interesting to see the shopping behaviors across everyone else in the next couple of years. The one hope that I have is that, what typically happens is that delivery tat is one of the main pain points that a consumer would have when you are shopping from a pure D2C website. And typically what we have seen in our journey is by the time we could get around to doing the next day delivery, there was a 15-minute delivery cycle that started, which completely changed the whole format in which the consumer's expectations are moving, right? So hopefully reach a stage where newer processes and newer companies come up which can cater to all of this very quickly for D2C brands.
Okay. No, thanks. Thank you everyone for making time today for this highly engaging discussion that went everywhere from, from how consumer needs are evolving to the kind of infrastructure that's established in the country from a supply chain perspective. But I love the way that we wrapped up that it is going to be India's decade, which seems to be the unanimous thought, which is an absolutely wonderful way to end this session. Thank you again, everyone, for making the time.
Thank you, everyone, for deep delving into the topic and imparting some really valuable information. Let's move further and explore more.